Economists have a word for this difference. They call it productivity. Productivity doesn't measure effort. It doesn't care how tired you are at the end of the day. It measures how much economic value is created for every hour of work. A farmer growing crops by hand can work all day and produce food for a few families. A farmer using modern machines can feed thousands in the same amount of time. The effort might be similar. The outcome is not. This is why two workers, equally skilled and equally motivated, can earn wildly different incomes depending on where they live. A factory worker in a low-income country may work longer hours than a factory worker in a high-income country. But the machines they use are older. The supply chains are slower. The infrastructure is weaker. So every hour of their labor produces less value. And this difference adds up. Hour by hour. Year by year. Generation by generation. In many poor countries, most people are stuck in low-productivity jobs. Agriculture, manual manufacturing, informal services. These jobs are essential. They keep society running. But they have a hard ceiling. You can only harvest so much by hand. You can only sew so many garments per day. You can only sell so many items on a street corner. No matter how hard you push, there's a limit to how much value your labor can create. Rich countries escaped this trap by changing not how hard people worked, but how work itself was organized. They invested in machines that multiplied human effort. They built infrastructure that reduced waste and delays. They created education systems that trained workers for complex tasks. Instead of relying on human strength, they relied on leverage. Leverage is the quiet force behind modern wealth. One person operating a machine can replace hundreds of labor hours. One engineer writing software can create tools used by millions. One efficient logistics system can move goods faster than entire workforces ever could. Low productivity keeps wages low. Low wages mean people spend most of their income just surviving. There's little left to save or invest. Without investment, machines remain outdated, infrastructure decays, and education systems struggle. So productivity stays low, and the cycle repeats. This is why simply telling people to work harder doesn't solve poverty. Most people already are. The real problem isn't effort. It's leverage. But there's another layer to this story, one that makes the gap even harder to close. Some countries didn't become rich by slowly building productivity from nothing. They became rich first, through colonization, through control of trade routes, through resource extraction. These early advantages created massive pools of capital. And that capital funded the very systems, factories, schools, infrastructure that later made those countries productive. In other words, wealth came before productivity. Once that head start existed, it compounded over time. Poorer countries, meanwhile, were often left with economies designed around extraction, not development. Raw materials left the country. Finished goods were imported back at higher prices. Local industries struggled to grow. Capital stayed scarce. Even after independence, the structure remained. This history doesn't explain everything, but it explains why catching up is so difficult. Because productivity isn't something you switch on overnight. It takes decades of stable investment. It requires trust in institutions. It depends on education systems that take a generation to mature. And without productivity, even extreme effort doesn't translate into wealth. This is why you see entire populations working endlessly, yet remaining poor. They are running on a treadmill that never speeds up. So when someone points to a rich country and says, they're rich because they work hard, they're confusing cause and effect. Rich countries work fewer hours precisely because they are productive. Their systems do more of the work for them. Hard work keeps an individual alive. Productivity determines whether a society prospers. And this distinction matters not just for countries but for people. At the individual level, the same principle applies. Working longer hours doesn't guarantee higher income. What matters is whether your work scales, whether it can be multiplied, whether it creates value beyond your own time. At the national level, this is the difference between survival and growth. Countries don't escape poverty by exhausting their people. They escape poverty by building systems that make effort count. machines that amplify labor, institutions that reduce friction, education that unlocks complex skills. These are slow, boring investments. They don't make headlines, but over time they change everything. So the next time you hear that a country is poor because its people don't work hard enough, remember this: effort is visible, productivity is invisible, but only one of them creates wealth. Hard work can keep a nation moving. Only systems can make it rich.